All right, so the last of our alkene reactions that we're going to talk about is the oxidative cleavage of an alkene. So what does that mean? Well, again, what we're going to see is these alkene bonds, these double bonds are being cleaved, right? So somebody's got a big old cleaver and chops it in half. So that means we're going to cut that bond in half, and it's going to be used through this oxidative method. So it's going to be replaced on either side with an oxygen, right? So here, I'm going to just follow what happens between my reactions and products. One side of my double bond is now forming this new molecule, this new ketone here, and then the other half, oops, is now over here, right? So it is literally a cleavage or a cutting of that double bond. It uses ozone, so that's this O3 here. Ozone's got, you have to actually draw two structures that are in resonance with one another. You've probably heard about it. It makes up the outermost layer of our atmosphere. It is fairly highly reactive. So what we'll see is if you have ozone, and then in the presence of DMS is like dimethyl sulfide. So this would be dimethyl sulfide. Okay, this is this would be the last step in these. These are also called ozonolysis reactions because the key player here is ozone. All right, so this is not a mechanism that you have to know necessarily, but it is interesting to see. So first step is actually the same as we're used to seeing, which is our double bond's going to play the role of a nucleophile and go and attack one end of that ozone. But then interestingly, this kicks off this series of rearrangements that leads then to the other end of that ozone attacking what would be, the carbocation that's formed. But of course, this is happening all at one step, so we don't call it carbocation. But the partially positive carbon that's left over after that double bond is playing the role of the nucleophile. So this forms this sort of cyclic intermediate here, which will rearrange itself in some complicated fashion to form another cyclic ozonide intermediate. These are actually, they're pretty unstable, but they are isolatable. So, and then the last step being treating it with that dimethyl sulfoxide, which is, dimethyl sulfide, which is playing the role of a reducing agent. You could also, so DMS, oops. So DMS. The other thing that you could also use would be zinc and water. Also would be playing the role of a reducing agent. And that's what gets you to your cleaved products. So the dead giveaway here, when you're looking for these reactions, your reducing agent might be different, but the real dead giveaway is the presence of that O3, right? The ozone in the reaction is how you know it's going to be oxidative cleavage. Okay, so then let's take a look at how we predict products. These actually really aren't too bad. Two different cases. So again, we're literally chopping that double bond. So one fragment will be this 3-carbon product here. So 1, 2, 3, with a carbonyl group at the end. The other one will be a 2-carbon. And remember, we called those functional groups aldehydes. Whoops, that's too many carbons. A 2-carbon aldehyde. All right, so these would be the products that I get here. And again, how you're doing these, how you're finding your products is you're literally chopping that bond. Okay. One interesting thing that occurs is when you're talking about cyclic alkanes, or cyclic alkenes rather. Because notice that when we chop this double bond, the remaining carbon chain is still connected. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 carbons. I'm going to go ahead and number just so I can keep track. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that means my product here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I should have that carbonyl group on carbons 1 and 6. right? So again, I've cleaved that alkene, that double bond, but because this was a cyclic structure, both ends are still attached to one another. What's much more difficult is with these problems can be working backwards. Okay, and in particular, when you can have some very complicated stuff. For example, a bicyclic reactant could lead to something ugly like this. And so how do we reconstruct what the reactant was in this particular problem? Well, you're going to go back and you're going to reconnect these carbonyl oxygens, right? So this group and this group here, these carbons used to be bound to one another through an alkene. That alkene was cleaved, okay? So I'm gonna like show you an example about how I would work backwards from this. So these two were connected. And then I got these two as well, okay? So I'm gonna work on first constructing my first ring from the blue. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those are 6 carbons apart. So that's going to be an alkene. I'm sorry, a cyclic alkene with 6-membered rings, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Where's my double bond going to be in this compound here? Well, it's going to be between carbons 1 and 6, right? Those are the ones that are currently attached to those carbonyl groups, which means that that's where my double bond used to be, is between these carbons here. Okay, and then I have this other portion of my molecule to worry about. This 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 carbons separate those, and most notably, they have to share. Look at how what these two rings share are those bonds 3 and 4 in my 6-membered ring, right? So that means that I know that there's going to be a 5-membered ring attached to carbons 3 and 4 in that 6-membered ring. And then I'm going to count, making sure to stick with what I had here, where carbon 1 in the green was carbon 3. So actually, let's go back to being green up here. So this would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now I need to make sure that I have a double bond between carbons 1 and 5 in that 5-membered ring. Right, so this would be my original, bicyclic alkene that I started with to get this big ugly product. And then, I chose these two groups to be connected in blue with a double bond, as well as the two groups, my 2 carbonyl oxygens that I colored in green. Those were originally a double bond. There's another bicyclic compound that you could have drawn that would have given you the same thing, right? So if instead I had said, I want these two to be connected and these two to be connected, then you could play that same game that we did before. So let's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So now this would be a 7-membered ring, which I'm especially terrible at drawing. Let's see if I can do it. Nice, okay. And I'm going to have between bonds 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Right, my double bond would be between carbons 1 and 7, because those are the two groups that have that those carbonyl bonds. So between 1 and 7. Now I'm going to look at what the other ring would be, which would be now 1, 2, 3, 4 carbons apart. And notice that they share where the wall in that bicyclic is going to be. It's going to be between carbons 3 and 4 in this 7-membered ring. So that means I need a square between carbons 3 and 4. And then again, I'm going to make sure carbon 3 in the one ring is actually 1 in my square, 2, 3, 4. And I need that double bond to to be between carbons 3 and 4. I'm sorry, between carbons 1 and 4. So that would be that there. I guess let me go ahead and do it in blue. All right, so definitely with these ones, what can be harder is when you have this big, ugly product like this and trying to work backwards. There's not always just one right answer, especially if it's complicated like this. You might be able to find multiple bicyclics that would lead you to the same product.